The dev server is here, and it's given us a glimpse of what some of the new vehicles are like. Obviously, the focus of this update are the Tier 8 jets, namely the F-16, MiG-29, and Tornado, to name a few. We'll run down each vehicle one by one, by how it's performing in the dev server, and try to see how it'll come out in the live version of this update. Let's start with the vehicles America gets. For aircraft, there's the A6E Tram and the F-16A. The A6E Tram is a 10.0 battle rating attacker with a FLIR sensor under the nose and is capable of dropping paveway bombs. While it's capable of mounting gun pods, it's fitted with two AIM-9L Sidewinder missiles for air defense. The biggest drawback of the A6E is the very limited vertical axis of the tram sensor. Apparently, it seems like if the plane flies directly above the target, it loses lock. This is somewhat of a deal breaker on the one feature that made the A6E somewhat desirable from a CAS perspective. It is the first to carry paveways in the USG, but is severely gimped by the guidance pod. Other than that, it's just another subsonic attacker lumped into a low BR with AIM-9Ls because... I don't know at this point. I don't think any more can be done within the dev server to make this premium vehicle enticing to buy. It's the only subsonic Tier 7 premium among the nations. The F-16A is in the US tree, and it is the Block 10 variant. It's capable of carrying 6 hindwiders of the J variant or the L variant. It has some basic ground ordnance like the GBU-8 electro-optical guided bomb, AGM-65B Mavericks, and dumb bombs. It's a really good dogfighter with a crazy thrust-to-weight ratio. While it has a radar, the AN/APG-66, it doesn't have radar missiles. An interesting feature of the F-16 is the implementation of drop tanks. Basically, drop tanks are separate from the main fuel timer and can be jettisoned manually or automatically when empty. Currently, the fuel tank texture is unfinished and is bugged to jettison at around 35 seconds before it is empty. The F-16A has some flight model issues, but in terms of armament, it will remain the same and will be an IR-only fighter when it comes to the live server. A miscellaneous upgrade to the existing vehicles in the US3 is the F4J acquiring its VTAS helmet-mounted device. It is a 1971 upgrade to allow pilots of the F4J to exploit the Sidewinder expanded acquisition mode that allowed slaving the 9G Seeker to the radar antenna. Through the visual target acquisition system, the Seeker followed the pilot's visor that displayed a rudimentary sight picture. This allowed the AIM-9G to lock onto targets based purely on the pilot's line of sight. The VTAS device had two iterations, the first one having a special screen to project the sight picture known as the Granny Glass, and the VTAS 2 by Honeywell removed the requirement entirely. These devices were mounted on existing helmet shells. This may or may not have inspired the integrated helmet designation and sighting system or IHADS on the Apache. The VTAS program ended with VTAS 2 and was only ever used on the F4J. For tanks, America gets two new vehicles, the M728 Combat Engineering Vehicle, which mounts a 165mm M135 gun similar to the Centurion AVRE, fires only HESH, and like the AVRE, it has dozer blades. Sitting at 7.0 like its British counterpart, the M728 will bring M60A1 armor at an entire battle rating lower. The next one is another pack vehicle like the M728 and is the M1128 Wolfpack. The Wolfpack stands for the 3rd Squadron, 2nd Cavalry Regiment of the United States Army. Basically, it's a Striker MGS without the cage armor and fits camo netting. Because of this, the regular Tech Tree M1128 had its cage armor turned into a researchable module, and it is without it, it gets no cage armor stock. The difference between the Wolfpack Striker and an M1128 is the top shell. The Wolfpack Striker gets the M833 as opposed to the Tech Tree variant's M900. And it's also at 9.7, which is a battle rating lower than the Tech Tree variant. The C76A1 shell in both Strikers are also removed and replaced with the M774. Germany, in this iteration of the dev server, gets a Tier 7 premium, the MiG-21 bis Lazur M. The Lazur M is a ground-controlled interception module as opposed to the SAO, which had the Polyot instrumental landing system. Don't worry, Neither of these names have any bearing to a feature in the game. The Lazur M gets R60M case like the SAO, and like all MiG-21 BIS variants, they got rolled back to 11.0 from 11.3. Germany is slated to get the Tornado IDS, but it's not in this current iteration of the dev server. It will most likely arrive by the time the live server drops. Oh, and the MiG-23 MLA also now gets access to R60M case. And we go to USSR. USSR. Not going to say that this patch has losers, but if you ask me if this update had a winner, it's got to be the USSR. The MiG-29-913 represents their newest top-tier aircraft. Fitted with two new missiles, the R-27 and R-73, they also incorporate the helmet-mounted system on the ZISH-5 helmet that allows it to utilize the full off-board capability of both missiles. R-73 in-game has a 120-degree off-board arc and a maximum overload of 40 Gs. It can engage targets of up to 4 kilometers in a tail chase and more in a head-on. The R-27T, the heat-seeking R-27, can also be cued by the helmet-mounted sight and get a kill from a range of 7 kilometers. The R-27T is incredibly hard to flare and is arguably the first missile in-game to have a no-escape zone. The R-27R is a SAR-H version, but unlike Sparrows, the R-27R can have radio command update on the inertial navigation system to allow it to update course if lock is broken and acquired again. This means that it won't blow up if you lose track, like the Sparrows. The slot back 1, or the NO-19 radar, has new modes, TWS HDN and PDHDN. HDN stands for head-on, as in this mode, any aircraft traveling side-on or away from the radar will not be locked and will only lock onto those aircraft in a head-on course for the radar. This feature was also implemented on a number of existing radars such as the Thomson CSF RDI radar, the Mirage 2000 CS5, and the AN AWG9 on the F-14. Anyway, with the way player feedback is going, the R-73 is most likely going to be removed from the MiG-29 and will be added when comparable missiles are available. That means the MiG-29 will be left with the R-60M and R-27s as its missiles. Personally, I remain ambivalent about this because what is a comparable missile to the R-73? The Python? Because US won't have a comparable missile from the R-73 until the AIM-9X comes along, because the AIM-9M is just an AIM-9L with stronger resistance to flares, and even at that, it didn't succeed. But that is a story for another time. The point is the MiG-29 might lose the R-73, and I'm really not sure how I feel about it. I mean, a good idea and a much needed idea is just to put the MiG-29 at 12.0 and keep its armaments. Outside of the MiG-29, the MiG-23 MLD gets the R-60M like its German counterpart. The Tier 7 premium for USSR is the MiG-23ML, which uses a weaker radar called the Sapphire 23ML. This radar could not fire and guide the upgraded R-24 missile, so it must lose it before it goes live. The R-24 was only slated to be fired by the Sapphire 23 MLA and MLA-2, which you can find on the German MiG-23 MLA and MiG-23 MLD. So most likely the MiG-23 ML will lose the R-24 and will go down to 11.0 with R-23s and R-60Ms. Basically a MiG-23M with a different radar and access to more chaff and flares through the BVP-5060 dispensers on the upper fuselage. The 9K37M2 Strela 10 is a bare-bones SAM launcher at the moment. The 9S86 snapshot ranging radar is inoperable, and the passive RF warning system 9S16 flat box is also not coded in. And I don't think it will, because it's a very complicated system to code. It has no night vision in-game, like the Rolands, and its only advantage at this moment is that it has 20G overload compared to the Stingers, which has 10. That makes it more viable against fast-moving aircraft. The UK has 3 new aircraft in this update. The Tornado GR1, which weirdly has a cockpit, but the rest of its components aren't modeled properly yet, such as the countermeasures that are not present, and the engines are still called the Rolls-Royce Pegasus Mark 105. But if you asked me, I wouldn't be against a VTOL Tornado. Its maximum armament so far are 2 AIM-9L Sidewinders and the 27mm Mauser gun. Its best guided ordnance is a GBU-24 Paveway 3 guided by the T-Out pod. Only one GBU-24 or two GBU-16s can be carried under the fuselage. The wing pylons can carry unguided 500-pound low-drag general-purpose or high-explosive bombs. The GR-1 only needs the countermeasures and it's more or less complete. The interesting part of the GR-1 is that its terrain-following radar is modeled in the X-ray despite not being usable in-game. UK's other aircraft is a squadron vehicle, the Sea Harrier FRS-1. It is a Harrier with two AIM-9Ls, but is slated to receive two more before going live for a maximum of AIM-9Ls. Oh, and it's a first-generation Harrier. It has RWR, 260 countermeasures, and the Blue Vixen radar. At 10.7, it will be the same battle rating as the J-35D without flares, RWR, and only RB-24Js. Britain's premium is the F4J UK, which is an F4J for the UK. Well, it was a Falkland. It's a post Falklands acquisition, and because of the necessity to use it by the 74 Squadron, there was very minimal upgrades, and it actually used American helmets for its compatibility, but it had British communication equipment. Instead of AIM-7Fs, it retains the sky flashes from the FGR-1, FGR-2, I mean, and FG-1. It also does not possess the visual targeting precision system that the American F4J had. Britain's newest tank is perhaps my favorite addition of the update, the Khalid. And this also marks the entrance of the first Jordanian vehicle in game. If you've watched my British 120mm video, you know that the Khalid was the Jordanian name for the cancelled Shear 2 project for the Iranians. It was a Chieftain Mark V over 2 with the Challenger 1's engine. At 9.0, it's got the same rounds as the Chieftain Mark V, the L15A3 APDS, and the L31A7 Hesh. But honestly, if anything, this is a Chieftain that should be at 8.7, not the Mark V itself. It's at the same BR as the Chieftain Mark 10 with darts and extra turret armor, and its only advantage over the Chieftain Mark 10 is that it's a bit faster. So if you were to ask me, you could put the Mark 5 at 8.3 with the Mark 3 and have the Khalid go down to 8.7 to make it a more desirable premium. But, I love the Khalid because I love the history of the Chieftain, but yeah, it's not going to be competitive with only APDS at 9.0. The Japanese have one new aircraft and it's a Tier 7 premium but isn't on the dev server just yet. The F4EJ ADTW is an F4EJ used by the Air Development and Test Wing of the Japan Air Self-Defense Force. It's an exact carbon copy of the F4EJ, so there's really no discussion to be had. So that's about it. I'm sorry for the T2 early players that bought into it and got replaced and update later, but come on. Is the T too early? You weren't supposed to buy it with SU-25s and A-10s flying around. Aside from that, the F4EJ Kai gets AIM-9Ls, meaning it gets AIM-9Ls and AIM-7Fs with a pulse Doppler radar, unlike the F4F and the German tree still stuck with the AIM-9J and no radar missiles. China gets a new Tier 7 premium, the J7D. The J7D is a Chinese upgraded MiG-21MF. The Chinese took a single Egyptian example and used it as a starting point for the J7 III project. It received the JL7 radar and in-fuselage chaff and flare dispensers, letting go of the SPS-141 pod. Its armament is exactly the same, a Chinese-built 23mm gun, but it uses Chinese missiles like the PL-5B and, finally, the PL-7 missile. Come on, you just have to add it to the Q5L now. China hasn't acquired their Tier 8 plane just yet, but according to the F-16 devlog, China will also get one. What variant it is remains to be known, but there was a variant called the F-16 Block 20 MLU that was found in the files. So it might be the one that will get it. At best, it will get an AMRAAM, hopefully not. And at worst, it's going to get an AIM-7M upgraded Sparrow with a monopole seeker. It is hard to chaff. Good luck. Anyways, China gets a new MBT, the WZ1001. Well, it's a copy of the ZTT-99A in the dev server at the moment. It's supposed to have better penetration on all the shells because the 125mm L48 was extended to L54, and it had some APSs that the ZTZ992 used, like the LWS and IR Dazzler. Italy's Tier 7 Premium is a Turkish Air Force F-104S. It's a carbon copy of the F-104S in the tech tree. However, their Tier 8 aircraft isn't here yet, but it's either the Tornado IDS or the F-16 Block 15 ADF found in the files. And aside from that, they get a cute truck, the CM52, which I think everyone spammed it in Reddit. So just go look for the CM52 on there. So far, France has nothing for air, but the Mirage F1C200 was found in the files in an unidentified Tier 8 fighter that they said was coming in the dev stream. Their tank is a new AMX 32105, which boasts a 0.3-second ace reload faster than the AMX 32120. But honestly, it's good because if you want to fill the 9.0 to 10.0 bracket of France, which is a bit lacking at the moment, this is the way to go. Sweden's Tier 7 Premium and Tier 8 fighter isn't here yet, but it's expected to be the J35J found in the files, and the JA37D also found in the files. The J35J, or Johan, is the final Draken variant used by the Swedish Air Force, incorporating 2 extra hardpoints, bringing it to a total of 6 RB-24J, RB-24J missiles, RWR, and chaff and flare pods. The J37D, however, is an improvement of the Viggen that allowed it to fire the RB-74, the AIM-9L, and, well, the J37C could also fire the RB-74, but the J37D might get the RB-74 missile, and hopefully not, but the RB-99 missile, also known as the AMRAAM. I really doubt it will receive the AMRAAM, but rather it will just get the AIM-9L or RB-74 and the Sky Flashes. Israel gets the F-16A Nets, which is identical to the F-16A in the US Tech Tree, except for the lack of the GBU-8 electro-optical guided bomb. The Tier 7 Premium is the Kafir Canard, which is a Kafir with smaller canards compared to the production variant Kafirs. It has 2 AIM-9Gs as its top missiles. It sits at 10.7. Essentially, it's just a Kafir C2 with a different canard setup or a crazy fast Nisher. And because Gaijin really loves me, they also gave me my beloved Magak 7C at 9.3, DM63, and thermals. I love it. My overall initial thoughts for the update is that by saturating the 10.7 matchmaker with new vehicles, they're creating a new black hole BR so that the 11.0 to 11.7 aircraft get sucked into their own matchmaker. That's at least how I see it. Also, the J7D is perhaps my new favorite fighter, and while I don't have a pro or anti opinion about Tier 7 premiums, I gotta admit the J7D feels like a really good alternative to the J7E. But I don't think I'll buy it because I already have the J7E spaded. I mean, talisman, so I can just grind whatever is China's getting using that. Once everything that Gaijin intends to add is added, the Apex Predators update will perhaps be one of the biggest updates in War Thunder history since probably update Supersonic or Locked On. Naturally, ground forces are taking a backseat in this update, but some sporadic additions here and there, like the WZ1001 and the Khalid, keep it interesting. Well, that's it for my preliminary thoughts. I'll do reviews on the new Tier 8 aircraft as they come out and I get them. Thanks for watching. This is the Dr. MD. Have good holidays and Godspeed.